England versus India. The Cricket Badger Test Match Daily Podcast. Can Joe Root's England dominate on home soil? 5 mouth-watering Test matches. Can Virat Kohli's India conquer the final frontier? Loving to talk Test cricket every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome along. It is another edition of the Cricket Badger podcast, the England against India Test Match Dailies. We didn't have to wait long to do this one. It was wrapped up very quickly on day 4 at Headingley. England bowling very nicely indeed. And India may be guilty a little bit of some poor batsmanship at times. I am joined today by 2 of my fan badgers, Nakul Pandey and Mark Hilton. Let's start with you, Nakul. I know you've been on duty for Guerrilla Cricket this morning, and I was expecting, I've kind of said a lot during this week about the fact that Headingley tends to get flatter. It's not necessarily a bowler's paradise on days 3 and 4. I was expecting India to make a better fist of it today. After all of that hard work yesterday, they seem to throw that in the bin today.
Yeah, it all happened very quickly once it started happening, once Pujara left that delivery from Robinson. It will be said yesterday, India did really well to come through yesterday, losing only the 2 wickets and with big gaps between them as well. There were more false shots. I know it was much longer innings, but there were, in terms of the density of false shots, it was very similar to the first innings. It was the first innings where really that first mad hour and a half lost India the Test match. You don't recover very often from 78 all out, and then that period where every good ball or every average ball took the edge and every edge went to hand. Yesterday, India got a little bit of luck and batted very well. I think today, again, Ollie Robinson was superb today, getting the ball to shag off that really awkward length that he can bowl. He can bowl that a little bit fuller and still get that bit of bounce because of his height. And I don't think India batted. Punt was a bit frenetic today, but I don't think the rest of them batted badly per se. I don't think it was. I don't think you would necessarily say that India threw it away per se. So, I mean, I think putting the blame on the second innings, I think, would be to overlook the catastrophe and how well England got on top in that first innings, and then with the bat as well.
278 all out though after being 215 for 2 overnight. Mark, India would have expected more than that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday, obviously, as Nakul said, they did well to only lose 2 wickets. There were quite a lot of false missing yesterday, so you could argue that they got a little bit lucky. But yeah, I mean, this morning they would have expected to at least bat 70 or 80 overs with 8 wickets less and two batsmen set, and Kohli looking better than he has done in previous innings in this series. But as Nakul said, as soon as Pujara got out, England were on the money. They bowled really well. I thought Robinson was excellent. They didn't really bowl anything loose or let the batsmen get settled, and it's quite difficult coming in as a new batter. So yeah, they would have expected more. But I mean, sometimes when you get these matches where you're massively behind and you've been bowled out cheaply in the first innings, you can do well for a period, but you get a new ball, a few wickets, and it just suddenly all falls flat again, and you don't recover from the initial kind of devastation, as Nakul indicated.
Nakul, India will be really happy with the fact that Pujara got runs in this Test match. That's important for them moving further forward into the series. I felt as well today, Virat Kohli, he had a really tough first half an hour. He's not in sparkling form at the moment. That's been well talked about, but I just thought he started to look a little bit more balanced and started to look as if he was hitting the ball a little bit sweeter, and then got out. And that's what Test cricket can do sometimes. But Virat is in need of runs, isn't he?
He is. I mean, he's made some very useful contributions in his long gap now between Test hundreds. He thought his 100 in the first innings of the Boxing Day Test match was an excellent 100. Sorry, Adelaide, not the Boxing Day Test match, and he scored some good runs as well when England toured India, and he looked decent today. He's not in the best of form. He is having to fight and to battle. He's good enough to do that, but and he's scoring runs where a lesser player in a similar sort of technical quandary wouldn't be able to get through. And I still think that there is a big score coming from him, and it was a curious one because he started to look, as you say, really comfortable. Robinson had overpitched a couple of times in that over and had been very sweetly first clipped through mid wicket and then punched down the ground to take him 2 and then beyond 50. But I wouldn't attach too much blame to him for the dismissal per se. I think there was some deliveries that he missed. I think that he was more culpable of fencing at and playing those sort of half defensive strokes to balls that aren't going to hit the stumps. But the ball that got him was a good delivery. It was just back of a length, just dragged his length back a little bit, and he had to play at it really. Maybe you could say maybe play with hard hands or whatever, but that happens, and he was well got out by Ollie Robinson, who I think was magnificent in that spell this morning. Bowled 8 overs on the trot to take his 4 wickets and put pay to any thoughts of Indian heroics. Virat Kohli is battling. Lots been talked about his technique and how he's gone a little bit more back to pushing more balls outside off stump, and now he's just opened his shoulder up a little bit, and and things aren't quite aligned properly. But similar to Pujara and similar to Rahane in the first Test match, I think Rahane looked fairly comfortable today until he got out, and that was the best I've seen Pujara bat in terms of his command over what he was trying to do for a long time. So that there are, I don't know if positives is taking positives from today from this Test match, because I think this is one of those Test matches that you try and forget about as quickly as possible. But it wasn't a complete write-off for India in that sense. And slight worry about they've got to get Ishant Sharma back aligned, because that was the worst he's bowled in about 7 years. But again, I think there's a more to be gained in a sense from writing this off and going and refreshing and not thinking about cricket for a day or two.
Ollie Robinson, Mark, as Nakul just said, exceptional today. 5 wickets in that second innings, bowled well in the first innings as well. He's bowled well in every Test he's played so far. He's played 4 and he's been good throughout. Man of the match, though, at Headingley, which will probably feel quite sweet to him. I mean, he was released by Yorkshire. He was immature at the time. Some behaviour I'm sure he looks back on and regrets a little bit. Worked very, very hard, though, on his game at Sussex. Has forced his way into international recognition and forced the selector's hand with a volume of wickets for Sussex. And he's pretty much written his own plane ticket, hasn't he, for this winter's Ashes series. He's been terrific.
Yeah, he looks natural for Test match cricket. He just looks a natural Test match bowler. He's got, he's just about quick enough. He can, but his pace sometimes goes down during the day, but he's quick enough. He moves the ball, he bowls an immaculate length. I mean, a lot of people have compared him to Joss Hazlewood, which is a big compliment. And I had my doubts about him simply because, not doubts, but I just wondered if he could step up. He has taken a lot of wickets for Sussex, but he has been bowling predominantly in the second division. So there's always that doubt about, the value of those wickets moving up to Test.
So this is the value of the conference, Mark. We don't have that discussion anymore.
Well, that's true to a large degree, but I mean, he just looks a class act. I think he looks a class bowler. So yes, he has got his plane ticket to Australia without a doubt. He looks as though he could take over the kind of Anderson mantle eventually, even though he's 27 when Jimmy starts winding down a bit, which at some point he's going to have to do. Who knows when? But he just looks like an incredibly consistent bowler. He will just come out and do it day after day. You know what you're going to get with him. So England have definitely found one there.
Nakul, Joe Root, a lot of criticism about his captaincy after Lords. That win, though, at Headingley is his 27th as England captain. That breaks the record. That's the most wins that any England captain has got. And I was watching him closely. I was on commentary today as well, and to see how he would cope with the tail, because that was the problem at Lords, wasn't it? To try and wipe the tail off. They've done that twice at Headingley. I did think he got a little bit defensive when Jadeja was opening his shoulders a little bit, but they still had a cushion there. But as it proved, in the end, Craig Overton got Jadeja with a good ball outside off stump that got him to nick off, and a good ball to Jadeja or Kohli is a good ball to Shami and Bumrah kind of thing, isn't it? But Jerry, it'll take a lot from that, won't he, to that England have regrouped and come back and levelled the series. And it sets the series up beautifully now.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a curious, considering all the doom and gloom and considering how beaten and broken England looked towards the end of Lords. At the start of day 5 at Lords, England were in the stronger position and were thinking about winning that game. And I keep talking about it, but how bizarre that period was, because one bowler getting a bit carried away is whatever, but the rest of the team getting carried away on his behalf, as it were. It wasn't Anderson wasn't bowling bounces. It was like the rest of the team were trying to say, don't shout at our dad. It was very, very weird. And then they, maybe the break could have benefited them a little bit, and they just went back to just basic Test match bowling, as it were, top of off and see what happens. It is easier, of course, when you're in a very strong position. In both innings in this, when the tail have come in, everything collapsing in a heap in the first innings, and then a nearly impossible rearguard with the ball with wickets falling and the tail and the top order falling in a heap. It is a different scenario to the strong but kind of halfway house position that they found themselves in at Lords. But I think that they bowled well enough, and that's all they had to do with the tail today. It shouldn't be remembered. It shouldn't be forgotten, rather, how poor Bumrah and Shami and the rest are with the bat, despite their heroics at Lords, and how they have worked very hard on their batting with the Indian batting coach Vikram Rathod over the winter, but they were starting from a very, very low base.
That's exactly it, isn't it? It's a low bar that they set off from. And I saw Jasprit Bumrah's interview with Dinesh Karthik that was on Sky, I think, yesterday, and he was saying that they are really working hard. They recognise the importance of lower order runs, but they've only got a fairly minimal kind of starting base from, haven't they? The likes of Jasprit Bumrah.
Yeah, they have no record at all to speak of. And Mohammad Shami's got 2 Test match 50s, one of which was on one of the flattest pitches of all time at Trent Bridge, and the other one was that very important one at Lords. Jasprit Bumrah scored 1.5 times his career run tally in that innings. And then Ishant Sharma is a decent blocker. Mohammad Siraj tries to back away to leg every time. Of those, only really Ishant Sharma would be considered to maybe even bat 9 in most Test attacks. They've gone with the attack that they think is best to get them 20 wickets, and it worked really well at Trent Bridge and at Lords. I think they bowled poorly. Certainly, Ishant Sharma looked hopelessly off rhythm. It's the worst I've seen him bowl in many, many years in that first innings. And Siraj was a little bit all over the place. On a good batting track, let's not. There were some clatters of wickets, but this was by and large a good batting pitch. That little drop below their standards, or a big drop in Ishant's case, was enough to let England, who were on a high, in India coming into it a little bit shell-shocked, and the game plan's already gone out of the window. All of those factors, combined with the fact that Root is in the form of his life, meant that England were able to turn a very good position into a basically near unlosable one. I heard a few people talking, including some of my guerrilla cricket colleagues, that England maybe left 80 runs out there with a lower order, but really, I know everyone panicked a little bit, but India had to do supremely well to get themselves into a position where saving the game was even a possibility to start.
They needed 520 at the very least, didn't they, in that second innings, and obviously fell a lot short of that. Mark, I mean, Jimmy Anderson's a player you know well from your Lancashire support. I read George DeBell's piece on Cricinfo, always excellent, and his yesterday was terrific. And he was talking about Jimmy Anderson. Obviously, he's now 39, and about his last 14 Test matches and the disparity between his first innings and second innings performances in the last 14 Tests that he's played. He averages, or he did prior to the wicket today, average 66.6 for 5 wickets in the second innings in those 14 Tests. He averaged had 40 wickets, an average of 17.3 in the first innings of those 14 Tests. My take on that is that often England don't bat very well in between, do they? So he never gets any chance to put his feet up, and he's 39, gets a bit stiff, and maybe comes out a little bit tired in that second innings. But it's quite a disparity, that, isn't it? You'd expect a fast bowler to maybe even average lower in the second innings, because tends to be the second innings scores are lower.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by that. I mean, you're right. In some of the test matches, he hasn't got his chance to get his feet up, and quite often England have been up against it in the second innings, and maybe circumstances have conspired against him. Do we read a lot into it? Should he? I mean, I don't know. It's I think it just might be one of those oddities. I mean, Andy Caddick had a similar strange record as well. About
His was reversed though, wasn't it? Second innings was better, wasn't it?
yeah, second inning was better, and he couldn't get any wickets in the first inning. So sometimes, I mean, sometimes it can work like that for bowlers in a stretch of time. And I think you saw today. I mean, if you saw Anderson today, he bowled a lot of overs yesterday, and then, obviously in the first innings, he bowled supremely well today. So there's nothing wrong with his bowling today, and actually, the pressure of his bowling, you could argue, set it up nicely for Robinson to get the wickets.
And that's what happens, Mark, isn't it? You bowl as a pair, or you bowl as a group of bowlers. One day, a bowler from one end might not get the look he deserves, and the other bowler will capitalise. And over a period of time, certainly over 165 Test matches, that levels itself out, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think Anderson bowled well enough today. Maybe you read the article from George last night. Well, he'd go out there and have something to prove, but he is 39. I mean, you could argue that as a 39-year-old, it's very difficult to sustain it through both innings, and he needs more rotation. He needs more help from his batsmen. He isn't 26 anymore. We talk about how athletes these days can go on a lot longer, but he is bowling fast or medium fast for long periods on hot days in Test match cricket. So it's not easy for him. But
I'll tell you what, though, there's a lot of 21-year-olds out there that are trying to become pacemen that would take Jimmy Anderson's current performance as their peak, wouldn't they? He's certainly not going downhill rapidly. Jimmy still a terrific performer. Let's get to India, Knuckle. I mean, I was critical yesterday of Jos Buttler. I think his recent run in England's team has been quite poor. Let's park that for a second. I don't want to make every podcast about Jos Buttler. Rishabh Pant, though, in this series, his keeping has been okay, but after a terrific recent run for India, his batting is. Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for him to come out and play one of those explosive knocks or play vintage Pant. He's been really all at sea today. His dismissal today was a ball he should have left alone. That was on probably 8th stump, and he chased after it with hard hands. He's not delivering, is he? I mean, there is an argument to say that with somebody of his kind of mercurial talent, you've got to take the fallow periods with the excellent periods as well. But India will be looking for him to provide a little bit more in Test matches 4 and 5.
It's kind of a question of degree with Rishabh Pant. I mean, he's been frenetic in this series to start with. He's got some starts, but he's been looking to advance at Anderson in particular, and he's been looking like he really wants to score, and that's fine. But it's a question of degree, as I say. In those innings in Australia, he was fairly orthodox for the first sections of those, and I think it might be a case of, it seems odd to think that Rishabh Pant wouldn't have faith in himself, but I think he's a good enough player to absorb a few periods batting normally, and then he's got a range of stroke that few others can match. I think I think it might just be a case of just calming down a little bit and trusting yourself. It's not as though it's not as though he gets beaten defensively a lot, or that he can't keep out the good balls, because he can. He's a properly good sort of middle order batter, and potentially even better than that, and can be devastating when he gets going. I think in dismissals in both innings, yes, in very difficult circumstances, but he got a bit frenetic and was poking at balls that he should have either been leading or really trying to smash through or over the offside, and they've looked quite ugly. I think he has not looked his assured and calm best self in this series.
Would you swap Jadeja and Pant around in that batting order and take Jadeja to 6 and Pant down to 7?
I think it's much of a muchness, to be honest. But
Jadeja's looked far more organised, hasn't he, defensively?
I don't think Pant has looked bad defensively. It's the fact that he keeps going at deliveries that the wide ones. I mean, it's just a case of, as I say, it's a question of degree. I think Pant is easily good enough to bat number 6 in this Test team on or many Test teams. I guess it depends how much bowling you want Jadeja to do. I think at the Oval and Old Trafford, I know I've said this a few times during this series, and Virat Kohli is still being very sort of non-committal on it, as you'd expect in a press conference. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ashwin does come in for one of the seam bowlers, and then you're expecting Jadeja to do a bit more bowling. So Bunt and Jadeja and Ashwin at 6, 7, and 8, I think is perfectly fine. I don't think that's a pressing consideration for India right now.
Mark, I think they will bring Ashwin in to the team for the final 2 Test matches at the Oval, which is next up, and then Old Trafford for Test match number 5. Obviously, that reduces the seam attack, but it also lengthens their tail. I mean, we talked a lot about their tail. They had that day out at Lords where they showed they could, with a bit of luck, get a few runs, but that tail of 8, 9, 10 and 11 is very weak in Test cricket. Bringing Ashwin in at number 8 at least does mitigate that a tad.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I'd be amazed if Ashwin doesn't play at the Oval. The forecast again is for dry weather this week in London, reasonably warm. We know the Oval's a good pitch. We know he's one of the top wickets there this year for Surrey. I mean, I know that India have won a Test match, but I've been very surprised he didn't play this Test match. For example, he's a great bowler in all conditions. He gives you control. He gives you attack. You might only have 3 seamers, but you can bowl him. You can probably bowl Ashwin all day if you needed to. That's that type of bowler. So I'd be absolutely astonished if he didn't play in the next Test match. And as you say, he should be batting at 8. The 8, 9, 10 jack of India are poor. I mean, Lords will probably just one of those weird aberrations which will never happen again. I mean, there's a combination of a bit of luck in England bowling, losing their heads, as Michael pointed out. It's a very weird hour, but I can't see that ever repeating itself. So Ashwin has to play at the Oval, I think, and he has to play instead of Dishant, because Dishant, for whatever reason, has looked short of a gallop, doesn't look in rhythm, and the series is 1-1 now. I don't think you can take a risk on him in the next Test match. The other 3 deserve the places in the side above him, and I would bring Ashwin back at number 8. And actually, I would agree with you. I think Pants has been frenetic. He's running down the pitch. He obviously doesn't. I don't think he trusts his technique in English conditions too much. I think Jadeja has played better than him in these conditions, and I'd have Jadeja at 6, and I'd put Pants at 7, because at the moment he's not looking like a top 6 batsman.
I'm going to clip out that little bit where you say I actually agree with you, because that doesn't get said very often by you on here. Let's look ahead to the 4th Test match. There is a little bit of doubt about Jos Buttler. Obviously, the birth of his second child is around the corner. I think Joe Root said after today's game, we're going to have to kind of wait and see what happens with that. If Jos isn't available, Knuckle, who would you give the gloves to in the 4th Test?
The obvious move is to give Johnny Bairstow the gloves and drop him down the order, and then bring in presumably Dan Lawrence or maybe Ollie Pope, actually, probably in the middle order. Pope, we understand, would have probably played at Lords had he not been had he been fit. So that might well be how they go. Is they'll move Bairstow down to 6 and give him the gloves and bring in Ollie Pope would be the most obvious move. So I think that's a fairly easy rejig for England. I'm not saying that Jos Buttler is a world beater, but neither am I in the position that he needs to be dropped and has been a failure at Test level. I just don't think the evidence bears that out. But if he's going to be with his wife at the birth of his child, that's entirely fine, and I'm glad we're in a position where male cricketers feel that that's the right thing to do, because it is. I think the only other change that I would see making is presume that Chris Wokes is fit. We've seen him back in second team action, and we saw him back in the blast for the Birmingham Bears yesterday, that he would come in for Sam Curran.
Yeah, I'd agree with both of those, and wish you well, Jos, for the birth of your second child around the corner, whenever that may be. Mark, any changes for you for England other than the 2 that Knuckle mentioned? I mean, you very rarely change a winning side. You'd imagine they'd stick with the same formula, wouldn't they, where they can?
Yeah, I think Bairstow, if Butler does miss this test match, and it is a but if he misses it, we'll take the gloves. But then we get back into the never-ending debate, then, don't we, about Bairstow then has the gloves, or Butler come back, and it seems to be a merry-go-round in terms of that. Personally, I'd keep Bairstow at 5 and give him the gloves anyway. He's batting at 5 now. I don't think it'd make any difference to him whether he bats at 5 or 6 and has the gloves, to be honest with you. I wouldn't move him about again. Yes, they'd probably bring Pope back in because he's the next cab off the rank. And they're consistent in terms of the selections, in terms of how they go forward. They're not going to pluck anybody out of county cricket. Wokes, if he's fit enough, then I'd definitely bring him back for Curran because, I've said it before on the podcast, and you look at his stats, and George's article indicated it yesterday. For me, he's not really a test match cricketer at the moment. He's a white ball cricketer, and Wokes is a far superior bowler and a far superior batsman. But apart from that,
I should just say one other change at this. I know Craig Overton bowled quite well, particularly at the tail today, and gives you some lower order runs. But the Oval has been, for the last few years, a very slow pitch. You don't get as much seam movement as you do even at Headingley. And I would be really tempted to bring Saki Mahmood in instead of Craig Overton, because he's someone who is quick enough who can take the pitch out of the equation. And I worry that would be a little bit pop gun on a slow pitch.
And something else, Mark, is that the chances are that Sakib's going to go to Australia. He could be a weapon for England in the Ashes series. You'd want to see him play a test match of this series, wouldn't you, rather than blood him in an Ashes test? I mean, I know this series is a high standard. It's probably a higher standard than the Ashes might be, but the Ashes brings pressures of its own, doesn't it?
Well, we've been saying all series, and I've been certainly saying all series that we need to get him in at some point. I thought, actually, I said on the podcast the other night the Conservatives' choice would be go with Overton. As it happens, it's worked out, and Overton has bowled well. I think it'd be very difficult to leave Overton out at the Oval now because he's bowled so well in this game, and he's been on the fringes of the side for a long time as well. So he will feel now he deserves a run. And you've got to think about those balances of how you treat the players and how they would react to it in terms of that. But yeah, they've got to try somehow to get Mahmood a test match before the Ashes. But I don't really see how they can do. They might wait until Old Trafford, where it will probably be a very abrasive pitch, where it probably will reverse swing. They may feel is probably something that they could gamble on putting him in up there, particularly as he knows Old Trafford so well. I think the other thing that goes against him in terms of playing next Thursday is they have got an extra 2 days rest, and they haven't exactly exerted themselves on Saturday morning, have they? So the bowlers should be relatively fresh. They could bring Mahmood in for Curran next week instead of Walt, because he hasn't played that much cricket, and take a chance on Overton at 8 and Robertson at 9, which to me is perfectly acceptable. They can bat at 8 and 9. That would be the option that I would probably go with, rather than risk Wolves. But they probably will bring Wolves back. But if they want to get him in next week, then the obvious thing is bring him in for Curran. But are they brave enough to do that and trust the batting yet? Who knows? But certainly Overton, I've seen Overton get runs in county cricket. He's a good enough bat player to bat 8. Robinson's good enough at 9. If your 9 batsmen all rounders can't get runs, then you shouldn't be expecting 10 and 11 to. So that's how I would go.
I felt a lot more comfortable watching Hasib Hamid opening and David Milan coming in at number 3. I'm sure there'll be fallow days ahead where there are failures ahead as well, because nobody is successful all the time unless you call Joe Root or Steve Smith in a certain year. But it does look a stronger lineup for England, I think, with that top 3 as it stands. Let's finish off, chaps. 1 apiece, 3 matches gone. This was a series I was really looking forward to. India coming to England. India are a fantastic side. And there is the leveler of the English conditions and the sea movement and the overheads and all of that kind of stuff, which has leveled it off a little bit. And obviously with the likes of Anderson in those conditions, they are a major threat to the Indian top order. But with 2 test matches to play, with 1 apiece, Knuckle, it's mouthwatering, isn't it? Old Trafford, the Oval next, brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the series between England and India the 2018 series was a superb series, even if it ended up being a very lopsided looking scorecard. And these are this is I say this as someone who's been saying this for the last 3 or 4 seasons. This is the best Indian team to have ever toured England, probably the best Indian. In fact, scratch that, definitely the best Indian Test team ever, and best Indian Test squad ever. And it's a testament to how difficult it is in England and how good Anderson and Root are that England have been able to keep level pegging with them throughout this series. I don't think India. I think India had a really poor Test match. Certainly, first day and a half or 2 days of the Test match today, and in this Test match. And I don't think they'll be so poor again in this series. So I think it's very, very well set up for 2 potentially mouth-watering Test matches on 2. One pitch that is often quite slow, and Old Trafford, which along with Headingley is probably the best cricket wicket in the country.
Mark, you've been telling us that you've had a bet on India to win this series. You've promised us all, I think, was it a free holiday somewhere very sunny? I think all of the badges are going to come away with you. Are you still confident you're going to be taking us on that plane?
Yeah, well, not on the plane. We could go sunny. We got to Salford Keys for a few days in the microclimate of Manchester, down the canal. But yeah, I'm still sticking to India. I think they had a bad Test match here. As Knuckles said, it was a crazy first morning, and that's where it was won and lost. I'm still saying that India had a better all-round side. However, if they do not pick Ashwin in this Test match at the Oval and they stick with this same formula, it could be a different story. So my advice to Mr. Kohli would, show some flexibility, put trust in the best spin bowler in the world, who can bowl in all conditions, who England will not want to face. I can assure you of that. And I think if he does that, extends his batting order, they've got the weapons to beat England. But if they stick with this formula, then he puts it at risk because they've got a long tail, and I think the Oval will be flat.
Well, I know Virat Kohli tunes in and he hangs on your every word, so I'm sure he'll take note of what you've just said there. On that introduction that I did for this series of podcasts, can England win on home soil? Can Giroud's England win on home soil? Can Virat Kohli conquer in this country? Both of those are big question marks still, aren't they? Because we don't know, and that's the beauty of Test cricket. We've got 2 terrific Test matches ahead, and I cannot wait. We are back for, going to go daily all the way through now. Obviously looking ahead now to the 4 Test match at the Oval. 2 terrific sides going at each other, hammer and tongs, and who knows? You just can't make a prediction, I don't think, in this series with any degree of confidence because you're never quite sure what's going to happen. Knuckle and Mark, thank you very much indeed today for joining me. I have been James, the Cricket Badger, and we'll see you again tomorrow. See you soon.